Okay, so MuleSoft, you fairly recently published the 2022 connectivity benchmark report. I suppose the best place to start would be giving us a sort of high-level view of the main findings of that.
Yes, so very exciting time. We've just published the 2022 benchmark report. And just a little bit of background, the benchmark report, we survey more than 1,000, enterprise and IT leaders and find out about what they're doing, what are the recent trends of digital transformation and challenges the organizations are facing. And there were some very interesting findings this year. And some number variations, from, the last 2 years have been quite interesting, actually, if I can go back a little. Because of the pandemic, a lot of things, especially in the digital and IT world, have accelerated. And one of the most interesting findings was how 70% of the organizations said that they're actually struggling to completely provide connected user experience across all the channels, despite now 3/4 of their customer interactions are digital. And that is a big number. So, and it's a huge shift from the pre-pandemic times, where not all customer interactions were digital, and the expectation of a digital and connected experience from the customer was much lower than what it is in today's time. So that's a very interesting finding, that 70% organizations told us that they're actually struggling to provide those, connected experience. The other finding, which I found quite interesting, was how much an organization can lose in revenue. So our survey said that about 7 million in revenue if they fail to successfully complete their digital transformation initiatives on time. And again, that is quite a huge number for any organization to lose that kind of revenue just because customers are choosing to put digital first, and organizations are choosing to make a digital first business for their customers. And another interesting finding was APIs and integration connected experiences used to be a concern of IT, typically, historically, but now business leaders are talking about how API strategy can help their businesses. Business leaders are actually mandating and demanding that there is a company-wide API strategy. They want to unlock the data. They want to create that connected experiences for their end users and customers, which is a major shift in mindset, I would say, in the industry. It's no longer considered an IT thing. It's more of the businesses need it, and the business leaders are now demanding an API strategy. And the last point that I found interesting, actually, which I would like to touch upon, is how getting integration right could drive revenue. Now, 40% of our respondents and organizations told us that they have already experienced revenue growth as a direct result of leveraging an API strategy, which is actually compared to 28%, which is last year, which is a huge shift. And if you look at what's accelerated in the last year, well, the pandemic, people couldn't be there for in-person experiences. And a lot of organizations actually had to leverage to these digital experiences and leverage the power of APIs. And they've already seen a revenue growth, and they know that this is the new way. This is the trend that the business is going, and this is the way to accelerate that business. So I would say those were the highlights of what the connectivity report brought to light.
Okay, and in terms of perhaps we call it the disjoint between what customers are expecting and maybe what companies can deliver, what did the survey highlight? What the particular, are there some obvious common themes between, what's going wrong, what companies haven't got that they need to invest in to improve that customer experience?
Absolutely. So like I said, I think I touched upon it a little bit in my last question, is customers are expecting a more seamless digital experience. And that expectation has gone up massively in the last 2 years because of the pandemic and the situation that we've been in. And I'll talk a little bit about myself. Me as a customer, I never did my shopping online. I always found it very convenient to just drop into a grocery store and do my weekly grocery shopping. But when the pandemic hit, everyone, like I'm sure you as well, was, kind of forced to do shopping online to keep ourselves safe and keep our families safe. And actually, I've never gone back. I just don't go to the store anymore. I expect to do my shopping online, but I also have high expectations of that shopping experience. I want to be able to use different devices, not lose my basket when I, forget to check out. I expect a smooth checkout process. I expect to be given some recommendation on alternatives if my product of choice is not available. So it's not just a basic, I go and select the stuff that I want in one go and check out and pay and get my groceries delivered. My expectation is a lot more than that. And I am sure, like me, a lot of consumers out there, just not in the retail sector, but in every single sector, are expecting that seamless connected experience when they do their shopping online or when they have a digital touch point. And the reality is that the organizations have a lot of underlying systems that they need to connect. The data lies in different applications. They have products somewhere and they have processes somewhere, and the business uses one system versus the IT another. Then there's legacy infrastructure to deal with. There's a lot going on in there. It's not easy to provide that seamless customer experience that the consumers are expecting these days. So I think what's happening now is the expectations are going up, and some organizations are catching up, and some organizations are still struggling and still trying to, put together everything that they have to meet customer expectations. And in context of meeting that customer expectations, the challenges that the organizations are facing are massive. And 55% of the organizations in that survey told us that they're finding it very, very difficult to integrate their user experience. And this has actually gone up, interestingly, from the last year, because last year, I think it was somewhere around 48%. And the reason I think it's gone up is because, one, the expectations have gone up and there's more push to integrate that experience. But the second, the organizations are using a lot more application and system for their own internal processes, because they've just realized that's the way they need to go. And hence they have a more complex landscape to integrate for those connected experiences.
And just, it always intrigues me with those obstacles. I mean, a lot of it's maybe technology based, as I think you've alluded to, but there's also, did the survey find out, or just anecdotally, companies understanding the customer? I mean, me as a journalist, I go to a website, for example, and often there isn't an obvious news site, news section. I think, well, where is it? And you go to about the company, or you hunt around the website and eventually find it in some little obscure corner. Whereas I as a journalist, I think, well, it should be front and center. So I guess what I'm saying, do you think a lot of companies have to understand how all their different customers want to access them, and then obviously the technology needs to back that up to enable that to be a sort of smooth transaction?
Yes, something that I always say and believe in, which wasn't really taken seriously about 3 years ago, was business drives technology. Technology does not drive business. And the reason I say that is that technology exists because there are business needs, and business exists because there are customer needs, and hence customer experience should be at the top of the stack for any organization. And Salesforce always talks about this customer 360, which is essentially understanding your customer and what you're saying, focusing on that customer experience, understanding what makes it easier for the customer to navigate, understanding what the customer wants out of the experience, making it easy and simple and a no-brainer for anyone who's having those kind of digital interactions. And in that sense, it is very important for the businesses to understand their customer behaviors and what their customer wants and needs out of that interaction. And hence that customer 360 is very important. And the only way businesses can actually get that customer 360 view is by analyzing all the data they have from different systems, different interactions, whether it's in-store or online, or a different website or a different section of their business, because they can put all of that together to truly understand what that customer experience means and truly deliver that customer experience to the customer. And all of that, again, is being hampered because that data that the business needs to form a 360-degree view of the customer does not exist in one system. It's not even in one application or one place. It probably lies in different siloed systems and different applications across multiple business units even. So it's not even just one business unit in a business. Enterprises these days, they use like upwards of 960 applications to do business, and to integrate data and make sense of that in terms of one customer's 360-degree view is a challenge, and it requires a strategic approach to it. You cannot do it by random integrations, and you definitely cannot do it manually.
But in terms of the good news is that sort of the increasing use of application programming interfaces, APIs, and low-code tools as helping companies address some of those challenges. What did the survey reveal about that? Sort of, you've hinted obviously that the pandemic's accelerated that, but what's the sort of landscape looking like with the take up of that kind of technology?
So one interesting thing that the survey revealed actually that IT budgets have increased over the last 2 years, which is a great news. But in contrast to the budget, actually, I think it said 40% of demand on IT went up as well. And there is no way that the IT teams within an organization can cater to that sort of demand, can deliver the projects that they are being asked to deliver for businesses. And now businesses are in a situation where they have to move fast. They have to be agile to keep up with the competition. They have to have new products and go-to-market strategies, which are much more quicker than what the IT can deliver for them. And so they are looking for easier and simpler ways to do these changes and go to market. And hence we see this trend in what we call as business technologists. Now, business technologists are essentially people who have their head in the business. They understand what they need, what their end users need, but are also not afraid to go and build something themselves. Well, they're not developers. They will not be writing code to build those applications, but they're happy to go and do a click and drag and drop flow, and they're happy to connect backend systems if they can just click it and configure it. And hence these low code trends, and these low code platforms are doing so well because it gives businesses the autonomy to do things outside of IT and go faster. But then the key challenge here is when business technologists work and when the businesses start doing things on their own, how do you make it secure? How do you govern this so that they're still aligned with the entire enterprise's strategy? And to do these, you need platforms. And the platforms have to be built in a way that IT can provide a framework for these business technologists to work so that security is default. When the business technologists go and configure something on a system, security is just applied by its own. And IT knows that whatever is being built on that platform is secured and has the right amount of governance on it. It has the right visibility without IT having to actually get involved in the build of stuff. And that is the new trend that we're seeing now. Businesses want that autonomy. Businesses don't want to go to IT and wait for a year for a simple change or a simple process change. They want to do it themselves, but they want to be safe. They don't want to expose the organizations to the perils of internet and security that comes as we digitalize the world more and more. So that low-code platform provides a way to govern these business technologies, business technologists, and a way to empower them to move faster.
So what you're describing sounds suspiciously to me like, remember shadow IT days when supposedly everyone around the company was getting their credit card out and firing up applications in the cloud, and the IT department was completely ignorant of that until, as you say, there was a security issue and stuff like that. But this time round, maybe whether they've learned their lesson or IT is the enabler here. So as you say, they're creating a sort of secure platform from which, I guess with certain permissions, required, anyone in the business can then, develop their own programs or modify existing. Is that the sort of ideal scenario? Yes,
absolutely. And shadow ITs existed for exactly the same pain points that we're seeing today, that the businesses want to move faster. They did not have time to wait for a year to be on IT's backlog for their project deliveries, etc. But now with platforms like MuleSoft, there is a way to actually provide that framework to the business and enable them and empower them to do stuff on their own without risking the security threat or without risking them going outside the API strategy or the governance framework that the enterprises have set. And the interesting thing is that's why the business leaders are now mandating that anything new that is built, any new changes or APIs, it all adheres to an enterprise API strategy. And there is, an API management tool so that they can see and govern it, their automation capability, so that there's minimum manual processes to be done. And hence they know the benefits are real, that they can actually pull in all that siloed data, they can seamlessly create those experiences, but without having the risk of security or becoming that shadow IT, like you said. They can still stay aligned to the enterprise strategy, but have that autonomy within the framework.
Okay, and maybe so you've touched on a lot of the points to do with people that are taking this approach maybe against, but it'd be great if you could perhaps sort of crystallize that, compare and contrast, a company maybe still carrying on with a traditional way of developing programs and trying to interact with customers, as opposed to a company that's embraced this new sort of API first, as a much more agile. What are the downsides for the traditional, and what are the benefits for embracing this new way of working?
So yes, there are. So we see a mixed bag. Although over the last year, I think 98% companies told us that they see the benefits of API, and they want to go API first and have a strategy first. However, a lot of companies are still taking a project approach to integration, and what they do instead, the traditional way of doing projects was they recognize the need to connect 2 to 3 systems, and the easiest and the simplest shortcut was to invest in custom integration. Well, we need to connect 3 systems. Let's build point-to-point systems and build 3 integrations and do it. Now, it works well in the very, very short term, but the way businesses go these days and the way things are changing around us, those processes and systems and honestly, the code goes out of date even before it goes live. And I've seen it because I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've experienced it myself. Before the developers can actually go test and put it live, the business needs have changed because there's a new parameter now, there's a new product, or there's a new even compliance issue that the business has to deal with. And hence these custom codes take a lot of time and investment in the actual skills and labor of developing it, but they don't make the organizations flexible. They break easily. They are not built for change. They're not built for agility. And a recent trend that has come up, which I'm sure you've heard of, and Gartner's talking about it this year a lot, is the composable enterprise. Essentially, that is the composable enterprise. Enterprises who embrace API strategy and composability build with a strategy in mind, build integrations and build APIs for reusability in the future. And essentially, what that reusability gives them is that when there's that change, that business process change, they have to compose the data to look different, to give a different experience, rather than rewrite everything from the scratch. Whereas in a traditional organization, when they do point-to-point integrations or they build custom integrations, everything has to be thrown away and done again from the scratch. So in the short term, for a traditional thinking organization, might look like a great idea and the cheaper option, to build those point-to-point custom integrations. But actually, in the long term, they're setting themselves up for failure because they are bound to change. There is no business which survives on the same business model, especially not today and in today's world. And hence, every business needs to have that flexibility to change, with a custom integration just cannot give them. And the cost associated is not the platform, it's the skills, it's the labor, retaining the people who actually understand custom integrations that they've built. That is difficult. We've seen the great resignation come in. How many people do you think stick to jobs, or stick to integrations or code that they built 5 years ago? And most of the time, the custom integrations are not standardized, they're not published, they're not discoverable, they're not reusable, and hence they are essentially pieces of throwaway code that is essentially throwaway investment for the organizations. So to answer your question, the traditional way of integration, I think most organizations have realized do not work. Unfortunately, a lot of the organizations make very point in time short-term decisions, and they still invest in a lot of custom code and custom integration and point-to-point thinking without having that reusability in mind, that governance in mind, that composability in mind, which actually then results long-term in more costs and lost revenue for them. And of course, that's the whole frustration of not being able to change quickly and having to rebuild and redo projects with changes. Whereas forward-thinking organizations now, digital-first organizations, are thinking about an organization-wide API strategy. They are putting composability first and top of their mind because they know what they're building today should not last them 3 months. It should last them at least a couple of years before going through a major change. They should be able to reuse it. They should be able to compose it as a building block and create new customer experiences, create new business processes, and create new ways of doing business without having to go back to the drawing board and start building from the scratch.
And you touched on an interesting thing there, the sort of people, the skills situation. I'm just wondering, often when there are changes in, big changes in and around IT, the skilled folks inside there get a little bit nervous because, it's a threat to them. And I'm just thinking, developers who are, good at the traditional coding, did the survey, or just again, anecdotally, is there any sort of pushback from them? They're a little bit nervous that, their jobs are being de-skilled, or as you say, because there is a skills shortage, or you're not guaranteed to hold on to people, the company's embracing it, and therefore everyone else sort of follow. I get, what I'm trying to say is, what's the balance between forcing it upon the IT and them coming willingly to this new way of working?
So I don't think the survey touched upon whether developers feel insecure about it, but from my own experience, what I feel is when you explain how much better and easier having a governed platform, having an API strategy makes it for the developers themselves, so they get standardized ways of working, they can rest assured that if they have put a security framework in place, every single API in the company being built and being exposed is adhering to that security framework. Every single API is governed in the same way. Every single API is built in a standard way that then they can reuse, or they can read, or they can even understand what's going on in the API, how it's secured, what is done. So actually speaking, having a platform like this and working with API strategy makes life for developers easier. And it's not always that every complex bit of enterprise is built with point and click code. So personally, I wouldn't say that it's a threat to the developer community, because it's not that businesses are going to build enterprise IT and maintain it. I think it's a great balance between developers having a standardized way to do what they love, but also make sure to minimize their own errors, to give them a standard framework to work with, which most developers actually love. They would love not doing the mundane. They would love using automation for applying security policies, etc. Whereas they do the real interesting and innovative piece about building that new framework. And I think it takes away a little bit of that uncertainty that what existed between IT and business. Was the reason IT did not want to relinquish control was it was unsure about security and governance. It was unsure about how businesses like the shadow ITs, how it would impact them downstream when there are problems. But now with a standardized framework and the developers providing that standard way of working, they can actually rest assured that the businesses are doing things within the right security framework, within the governance. The developers would have visibility. They would know that things that are coming out of the business technologies are standardized. And hence they know that it's all within the enterprise strategy that they set out to be in the future. So actually they're helping the organizations being more composable. So I believe in a way, developers also are enhancing their skills. They're thinking more strategically. They are getting to be part of a more long-term strategy and be part of the innovation actually and focus on the innovation rather than going into bug fix mode or firefighting mode with changes. Now changes are about strategy and composability and innovation. So there's a huge shift in mindset which happens there, and also the quality of work that people do in development teams changes massively. Innovation versus firefighting. Any day a developer would choose innovation because that's the most enjoyable part of their job.
And maybe expanding that to a sort of the company-wide basis. We're talking about the opportunity here. If you're a company and you haven't yet sort of embarked on this, is there a without trying to scare people, but is there a timeline? Is it the next 12, 18 months? How quickly do you think companies need to embrace this new way of working before one or more of their competitors has done it and is therefore much more agile and providing that seamless customer experience, which is going to show up anyone who's not able to to match that?
Yes, actually, the best time to do it was yesterday, like everything in the IT industry. But essentially, I don't want to scare anyone, but there is an urgency right now. Like I said, 3/4 of all customer interactions are already digital for most enterprises. And only 28% of the systems, out of these 960 applications that the companies use on an average, only 28% are connected. And if you look at that gap, the math doesn't add up. Rising customer expectations, some competitors really doing it well and focusing on connecting those 900 applications in the right way to provide the right customer experience. Organizations who are able to get there first and who are more agile and who can adapt to the business and market faster survive. And we saw a few examples of that already during the pandemic. Companies which did not have a digital presence struggled during the last 2 years, whereas companies who could quickly adapt to the whole digital transformation, to the digital experience for the customers, who could adapt and go and say link up to Deliveroo deliveries, survived. Whereas restaurants who could not go online, who could not switch to takeaways, struggled during the last 2 years. And that is just one example and of a pandemic. We might not go through a pandemic every single year, but the fact is that we are going through a change and a shift in mindset and a change in expectations from the customer every single year. The expectations only going up; it's not going down. So what used to be a acceptable experience last year probably won't be an acceptable experience end of this year, because customers will see better and learn better, and some organizations will make it easier for them. And to be honest, there's a huge chance that consumers will move to doing easier business. Everybody is busy. No one wants to spend so much time on their digital interaction. They just want everything to be done for them. In fact, one of our studies also showed that people are focusing so much on AI. They like the recommendations that come up. When I go shopping online, I may be looking at a shirt, but maybe I just like, I don't know, an accessory that the model is wearing. So how do I find that accessory? I would almost expect the website to tell me how to find the whole thing rather than, well, what I search for, which is a shirt. So with those kind of expectations going up, there is an urgency for organizations to start or accelerate digital transformation. And we've seen it happen over the last year. Like I said, 98% of our organizations said that they're already thinking about an API strategy, or they've already started using an API strategy. They're thinking about composability as a way forward for them, which is a huge thing. And nearly half of our organizations said that they are already reusing assets and APIs, and they're the way they're packaging ITs and API now, versus I think 41% last year. So that's already an increase of 7% year on year. So yes, there is a urgency to go digital, because that is the way the world's going. And there's only one way to have a digital strategy, which will stand the test of time, is how do you make your organization more composable and ready for agility, because change is the only constant in this world.
And maybe just in sort of finishing for companies, looking at this, as you say, the vast majority are aware of it if they haven't started, or even those beginning. I mean, is there a traditionally a lot of these things, you pick an easy little project, go with that. Yes, it works, and then you carry on. But in bearing in mind the time frame, is it possible to roll it out? And do you start with new applications because that's the easiest, or do you look at important legacy applications and sort of re-engineer them to be much more flexible for digital? I mean, is there I suspect there isn't, but is there a standard approach, or does it really vary from every every company's got a completely different set of circumstances? Thoughts about that?
So the most common and easiest way, like you said, Phil, is to start with, say, new applications. Test it out more on a green field, see how it works, learn from your mistakes, which you're bound to make in the first, few APIs maybe, and take that learning back until you. So there are a few things that companies need to go on this journey. So obviously it's a strategy, and strategy takes time to build. And it's always good to have a few pilot tests projects with a low risk, so that there is a room to change and improve without impacting business. As companies pilot these little programs or projects or build their first few APIs, they also build the muscle, the skills, and the thinking within the organization. So to take a big transformative project, to replace a big legacy system that maybe holds 80% of their customer data, it's a big undertaking. It's also a big risk. So companies need some sort of an experience. They need the right people. They also need the right culture and mindset to take those kind of changes. So it's best to start in a low risk area, build that muscle, and then move on to the bigger areas. The other thing that most companies do while doing this is a big bang approach never works. Having too many variables in the equation is difficult to manage in a complex environment. So the best thing is maybe take one use case at a time and then just build on it. But every single use case, even the smallest of APIs, if they're built with the right strategy, composability, reusability in mind, that means essentially the next project is going to be that much simpler because you already have maybe 2 reusable components that you can plug into that project. And hence, at least you're building 2 less APIs or 2 less components in that next project or next transformation that you do. So it is a iterative approach. It is a step-by-step approach. I definitely would not recommend going big bang and absolutely sweep change everything that organizations have. It has to be a step-by-step, well-thought-of approach, starting with a use case, building that muscle as you go, incorporating back that experience of having those first few use cases, and then building on top of it.
And this might be a slightly unfair final question, but bear in mind you said I think the average organization has well over 900 apps. Would you even hazard a guess at how long complete integration and digitalization of those would take? Are we talking, I don't know, 18 months to 2 years ideally to gain sort of maximum market advantage, or do you think it's inevitably will just take a little bit longer because there's so much to integrate?
It really depends. Now, there is no timeline that you can put to integrating 900 applications. I think a lot depends on how much skill does the organization have, what's their capacity for change. It's also a big cultural shift to go into a composable enterprise mindset. There's also a little bit of organization in there. They have to have a center for enablement. IT has to work as a center for enablement for the businesses. Now, if the organizations are set up correctly within their organization, they might be able to accelerate it because their business technologists might be able to use low code and no code platforms to actually build those smaller pieces of integrations and unlock data from some of those 900 applications, without relying on IT. If IT has simply been able to maybe expose that data as an API, and the business technologists can take it and compose it into a business process that they need. So it really depends on the organization and its capacity to move at pace. Some organizations do it at tremendous pace. It even surprises us. And some organizations just have that little more technical debt to deal with, with their existing landscape, that they need a little bit more time. They need a little bit more time to even shift the mindset or reorganize themselves to set them up for success in a way that they can think and be a composable enterprise. So fortunately, I don't have a timeline for you. And that is a very difficult question to answer, yes.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, Emily, you've given some great insight into the topic we discussed. And so I'm very grateful indeed for your patience in answering all my questions and for your time. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.